Hello and welcome to Treasury Notes, a financial education program from the West Virginia State Treasurer's Office. I'm your host, Gina Joins. The State Treasurer's Office teamed up with Mission West Virginia earlier this year to raise more than $15,000 through the second annual SMART5.29K Run Walk. Money raised during the event is dedicated to help children adopted from West Virginia's foster care system boost their college savings through SMART 529. Coming up a little later in the show, we're going to learn more about the families who benefit from this worthwhile cause, as well as how you can get involved in future events. But first, a closer look at another Treasury Office program. Back in 2005, state lawmakers created the West Virginia Board of Treasury Investments to make sure the state's operating funds are carefully managed. The BTI provides safe, efficient, and liquid investments for our government. State Treasurer John Perdue serves as chairman of that board, which now manages more than $3 billion in assets. Treasurer Perdue and his team work with external advisors and consultants to ensure your money is handled with the best of care. And to talk more about that today, the BTI's partnerships and the investment process, are Amy Michelson and Paige Wilhelm with Federated Securities, which is one of the world's leading financial firms. Amy and Paige, we want to thank you for joining us here today. We're so happy to have you back on the show. It's been a couple of years, Amy, since we had you as a guest on the show, and we're excited to really talk about what it is that you guys do. So let's just get right into it. Federated is one of the financial advisors for the state's Board of Treasury Investments. Tell us a little bit more about the company and really your qualifications and your partnership with the state.
Be glad to, Gina. We're very proud, first of all, to serve the West Virginia Treasurer's Office and the WVBTI. And we have a large presence in the public sector, which I think makes us uniquely qualified for the partnership that our organizations enjoy. We manage money across the country, $365 billion under management at this point. And in the public sector, we are managing assets in all 50 states at either the state, county, or local levels of government. And so we're very accustomed to the demands of a Treasury office, the fact that the money needs to be managed conservatively and yet and safely, but yet to still produce an attractive return.
And Paige, you serve as the portfolio manager. Just talk about that role in your relationship with the BTI.
Sure. We manage $1 billion in cash for the BTI, and my role is to manage that cash each day so we preserve the principal, we maintain that $1 price for the participant, and we also provide them with the daily liquidity that they might need.
Right. So, Amy, explain why a state investment board should really work with a firm like yours. That's a question that I think we're asked all the time because the general public really doesn't always see the full relationship at work. So, why should we work with a firm like yours, and why should the BTI be involved with someone like Federated?
Well, Gina, I would say that investment management is a very specific type of business, and while the West Virginia Board of Treasury Investments is staffed with consummate professionals, the fact is they are not people who choose securities each and every day, buying and selling securities for portfolios like the one Paige manages. This is all that our company does. This is all we do is manage money. We're not a broker, we're not a bank, we just manage money. And so that makes the partnership very unique, and we're able to complement and augment the talents at the West Virginia Board of Treasury Investments.
Right, absolutely, and that brings up a good point, Paige. The BTI works with Federated, also works with other financial consultants for different layers of review. Why is that process so important for this type of work?
Well, that's helpful for the participant because it actually gives them another set of eyes overseeing what we as portfolio managers are doing. So whether that's a consultant that's looking at the performance, looking at the securities that we're buying, making sure we're in compliance with the state's investment guidelines, or whether it's an outside rating agency that's reviewing that information to make sure that the participant is getting the most conservative investment.
Sure. Let's talk about experience. Amy, I'm going to turn to you for this question. Federated does bring quite a bit of experience to the BTI to help them make some informed decisions. Can you talk a little bit more about that process and why that is so important?
Sure. Well, within Federated, we have teams of portfolio managers, analysts, and traders. And we currently manage 2 portfolios for you, one of which is represented by Paige here on the cash side. We also manage a bond portfolio that we spoke about when you had us on the show a while back, 18 months or so back. But these are distinct teams wherein the portfolio manager constructs the portfolio, makes the strategic decisions. The analyst actually chooses the individual securities from a universe of approved investments, and the trader trades in the marketplace. And so we have a vast infrastructure that incorporates those people, the process they use, and then the various technological tools that they use in managing the money for West Virginia. So it's, as I say, very broad and deep, and offers very robust resources to the state.
And complicated too, and that's why I think, you know, as we talked about, Paige, the levels, the different levels and layers of review are so important in this type of work. Let's talk a little bit about the money you manage for the BTI. Can you give us an idea of how much we're talking about, and really what types of securities you're investing in for the Board of Treasury Investment?
Sure. We manage about approximately $1 billion in the cash position for the BTI, and we invest in very, very short-term securities. So it's part of the bond market, but it's the very short end of the bond market. So every security we're buying would have a maturity of a couple days to a couple weeks to a year maximum. So in that very short end. And it's things like bank CDs, commercial paper, which is a short-term instrument that's typically issued by a large corporation like a Caterpillar, an IBM, or someone like that. So very short-term instruments that mature relatively quickly and maintain a nice stable price for us.
This is a little bit of a broad question, but can we talk a little bit about your investment strategy, how you make these decisions, and what type of strategy goes into this?
Well, there's 2 things are most important. One is, what is our outlook for short-term interest rates? So what do we think is going to happen with the Federal Reserve Board the next time they meet in December? Are they going to raise rates, or are they going to lower rates? The other important thing is, what are the needs of the participants that are invested in the cash pool? Some of them are using the cash pool to invest money during the month so they can make payroll on the next payday. Some of them are putting that cash in the pool because it's bond proceeds from a bond offering that they had. So our combination of Amy and our salespeople talking to the participants in the pool and knowing what their cash flow needs are, in conjunction with our outlook for interest rates, kind of gives us some guidance as to where we want to invest on that money market curve and what types of securities we want to invest in on any given day.
And again, we're talking about short-term investments, and I think it's really important that our audience understands this isn't the long-term outlook. We're talking about more liquid investments. So how do you decide about this investment process? Do you have a system? Is it, I'm sure, as we mentioned before, it goes over many different layers of review and processes.
Right. As Amy mentioned, because there's 3 kind of groups of people within the investment department, the traders, portfolio managers, and analysts, we all work together each day. We meet as a team to decide, what do we think the Fed is going to do? When do we think the next raise in interest rates or decline in interest rates is going to come? And where do we want the overall average maturity of the fund to be? Even though we can buy securities out 1 year, we want to keep the average maturity of the entire portfolio at 60 days or less. So we look at securities along the yield curve based on our outlook for interest rates and decide, what do we think is most attractive today, the 1-month part of the curve or the 12-month part of the curve? And then when we find that value on the curve, what's the most attractive instrument? Is it a bank CD, or is it a piece of commercial paper? So it's different decisions each day, but all structured around what is our average maturity target based on that outlook for interest rates and the needs of the participants for their cash.
Again, talking about short-term investments, but we're not just talking about the state and state agencies. There are local governments that also invest money with the Board of Treasury Investments. How do you work with participants on who invest in that pool and on that level? Is there any specific thing that you can tell us about that relationship?
The first thing is that we take their needs very seriously, because as Paige mentioned, we're operating in the cash space. So this money represents their most liquid assets. And it means that this is either their operating cash, or it's possibly money that represents the proceeds from bonds that they've issued. And so they can't afford to squander it. And so
Right.
as we manage it, it has to be managed to $1 per share. And we have to take into account the need for possible daily liquidity. And when those two objectives have met, on top of that, we attempt to optimize a current yield on their behalf. So the participants' needs are first and foremost, and we reach out to them, talk to them frequently, make sure we can correctly anticipate their cash flows, and understand just how they're using the portfolio that we're managing on their behalf.
Absolutely. We are going to take a break, but before we take the break, you touched on this just a little bit earlier. Talk about your relationship with some other states. I know you work here with the West Virginia Board of Treasury Investments, but that's not your only governmental relationship that Federated has.
That's true. The public sector is a centerpiece of our business, and state business in particular has been very important to us and a big area of our growth. Currently, we're working directly with 32 different states. And so I like to think that gives us a very unique vantage point and an expertise that we can bring here to West Virginia, having seen challenges elsewhere and applied solutions that may be appropriate here.
Okay, all right. Well, Amy and Paige, some great information. We are going to take a quick break right now, but when we return, I'll talk more with our guests about the economy and the market conditions. Some pretty interesting stuff we're excited to talk about, so please stay with us. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Treasury Notes. I'm your host, Gina Joins. I'm here today with two people who work closely with the West Virginia Board of Treasury Investments. Amy Michelson and Paige Wilhelm with Federated Securities. They serve as financial advisors for the Board of Treasury Investments. And before the break, we talked a lot about Federated's role and how you work with the Board of Treasury Investments. But now I want to talk a little bit about the economy in general. And I'm just going to put this out there for our viewers. We are taping this the day after the presidential election. So right off the bat, I'm just going to go right into it. Can you give us some thoughts on what this is going to mean for our country moving forward? A lot happened yesterday, and I'm sure that a lot will be discussed in the days to come, and this show will air several times in the next month. But I just want to talk to you about your impressions about how the financial world is going to move forward.
We have learned over time to plan for chaos. And I think even if people have short memories, they'll recall 2008 and what really launched a financial crisis from that point forward. And so whether we're talking about professional investing or personal investing, we have to plan for the unexpected. And I don't think anybody ever knows what's around the corner. We've had pervasively low interest rates, we've had an erratic stock market. And so I think the best advice is to plan, diversify. That's very much a part of our culture and how we address these crazy markets that
Absolutely,
we have.
all good information. Paige, I'll just direct the question to you as well. Just some initial thoughts. We are the day after a presidential election. We are taping this show, and it could change a lot in the financial world. So, any thoughts on that?
Sure. From the short end standpoint, meaning that money market curve, I know we saw a lot of volatility right after the election. In the middle of the night, the Asian markets opened up, and the Dow was down about 800 points during the middle of the night. It's since recovered. At this time, it's up about 200 points today, the day after the election. We'll see what's to come. Part of that, when you look at financial markets, is just the unknown. Nobody knows what Trump is going to do. If Hillary Clinton had won, that would have been more of a known commodity, and we probably wouldn't have seen the financial markets react the way they did. So huge sell-offs late in the night, and things seem to have recovered today. Expect to see volatility like that as we go through the next few months until Trump is the president and we see what some of his plans are going to be. But when we take a step back and we look at just the cash market, which is impacting West Virginia's cash pool, we really didn't see any impact today, which is a good thing from the
Sure.
participant standpoint. So the yields that we were able to invest in have stayed calm today, and we're still able to invest in those same types of securities. We haven't seen yields go up or down. Things have remained calm. And I expect that to continue in the money markets, in this short cash space. We might see a little bit of volatility day to day, but I think things will remain calm, and we'll get back to looking at what is the next move from the Federal Reserve Board going to be, as opposed to what's going to happen, post the election day.
Sure. Taking a little bit of a step back, how does our current market really compare to years past? I mean, it's a weird day to be talking about this right after a presidential election, but can you give us some insight on that as well?
Sure. I would say, once again, in the cash space, it's euphoric almost, because we went, since 2008 when we had the financial crisis, we all watched short-term interest rates fall to zero. And we spent about 7 years at zero interest rate levels. So last year in December, when we actually saw the Fed raise rates by 25 basis points, so 0.25%, we were actually happy doing cartwheels down the hallways. And our expectation is that we're going to see the Fed raise rates again this December, and maybe one or two more times in 2017. So if you're a participant in a cash pool that's been earning very, very low interest rates for years, it's nice to see these increasing rates, and it's nice to earn a little bit more money for their cash.
Well, you're touching on my next question. That was really, where do you see interest rates going over the next few years? Can you give us a kind of an outlook of what you see happening?
Sure. I think the U.S. economy is doing better than it had been post-financial crisis. It's not growing gangbusters, but it is moving in line with the Fed's expectations. The unemployment rate looks very good. We're adding jobs. They're not at stellar rates, but the U.S. economy is adding jobs. The inflation rates are not high, but they are kind of trending upward. With a new president and with new fiscal policies, we might start to see those inflation rates tick up a little bit more quickly than we had in the past. If that happens, then you can expect to see interest rates go up maybe a little bit more quickly than we had expected under the previous presidency. So once again, our outlook is for a 25 basis point move this December from the Fed, and then maybe 2 more moves next year in 2017. As we look out beyond that, I think it's just going to be a function of how quickly you see those inflation rates move up. And how much growth we see within the U.S. economy. I don't expect it to be gangbusters, but I expect it to keep trending upward.
Do either of you have any views on the value of the U.S. dollar holding up in the global economy?
I think that with some of Trump's policies, that what we think he's going to do, we haven't heard anything officially yet, but if we do see the kind of policies that are more fiscal stimulus, more maybe anti-trade with other countries around the world, then that becomes inflationary, and it's actually better. It makes the dollar a little bit stronger versus other currencies.
Sure. A lot of our viewers, they, don't work in state government. Can you give us some thoughts on just personal investing, this low rate environment? What are we talking about if we kind of switch gears here and just talk to the average person out there who doesn't really, it wouldn't really be focused on what the BTI is doing, but maybe it wants to know some information for their own personal lives about what all this means?
Gina, I'm asked this question a lot, and the advice couldn't be more simple, and that is to keep it simple. I always tell individual investors, if you can't pronounce the investment, don't buy it. If it takes someone more than 5 minutes to explain it to you, don't buy it. Have a game plan and stick with it for the long term, and don't be overly focused on intermittent movements in the market and different events like elections. Use a financial advisor if you can. They add a lot of value in helping you to create a comprehensive plan. But diversify, use stocks, bonds, cash, And a great way to access those investments isn't necessarily by purchasing them directly, but by using vehicles like mutual funds that give you optimal diversification.
Yeah, you talk a lot about diversifying, and I think that's a really key point that viewers probably should take away from a conversation that they would have with either one of you. Why is that so important? Why do you think that, I mean, you go back to the old adage, don't put all your eggs in one basket, right?
I was just thinking the same thing.
That's right. That's right. It is really that simple. Within the stock market, there are different niches within the market. You have growth stocks, you have income stocks, you have international stocks. A well-rounded basket would have some representation from all of those and would be offset by exposure to the bond market. And so when one part of the market is up, another is down, and you can insulate your portfolio and not leave yourself vulnerable to overall events like going back to 2008, which we've already mentioned a couple of times, but rather keep yourself on a steady course toward retirement.
We still have a little bit of time left, so can we kind of backtrack to that time period, which you probably don't want to do, but I mean, do you see something like that happening again in the near future? Do you think we're on a slow trajectory up, or is that in the realm of possibilities again?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
From a credit standpoint and the types of securities that we're investing in and things that could happen within the economy, I don't think we're ever going to get back, at least in my lifetime, to a 2008 type crisis. The crisis was really started with subprime mortgages, which I know nobody wants to talk about that, and it was really a banking crisis. The banks are so much stronger today than they were in 2008. They have more equity, more capital. They have more liquidity. Those were all the things that were kind of lacking in 2008. So because of regulation, it's actually improved the overall health of the banking and the financial system. So it wouldn't be as stressed as it was back in 2008.
But you guys, you hear from investors all the time, I'm sure. Did it change the way people manage their money? It had to.
Absolutely.
I mean, it really had to. How do you see that?
Well, I agree with everything that Paige just said. I think, however, the recovery has been slow compared to prior recoveries. And so it allows people to have long memory for what happened back then, even though we're not likely to see a convergence of those same types of events happening now. It makes people more cautious, and maybe that's not a bad thing, because back then there was more of a freewheeling attitude toward investments, toward the dynamics that allowed these mortgages to be created that possibly should have never been written in the first place. So we're in a more cautious time, and that's a positive.
I think I'm sorry.
No, it'll be interesting to see how things move forward. Go ahead, Paige.
Another good rule of thumb is, if you hear about an investment where the yield just seems incredible, like out of the realm of anything you've ever seen, there's probably a reason for that, and you probably don't want to invest in that product.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of what happened in 2008.
Sure. Well, I'm here with Amy Michelson, Paige Wilhelm with Federated. Thank you, ladies, so much for joining me. Before we go, just any final thoughts? You help manage the funds with our Board of Treasury Investments, which is run out of the State Treasurer's Office, and we appreciate the partnership we have with the two of you. Any final thoughts as we close out the show?
Just want to say it's a privilege and a pleasure to service the West Virginia Board of Treasury Investments. It truly is. It's a fine partnership, and we're glad to deploy our skills here on the ground with your people.
We appreciate you. Paige, any final thoughts on just the partnership with the BTI and the relationship that Federated has developed with West Virginia over the years?
I would echo what Amy said and just say it really is a good partnership. We talk to each other on a regular basis, even though we're in Pittsburgh and not here in West Virginia. We have open dialogue.
We're neighbors.
We're neighbors.
We really like each
That's
other.
right. That's
There you go. Well, as I said, we're taping this the day after the presidential election. It should be interesting to see what happens, to say the least, when it comes to the financial markets. Again, the Board of Treasury Investments, the State Treasurer's Office, we appreciate the partnership we have with Federated Securities, and I thank you both for being here with us today.
We'd be remiss to not extend congratulations to John Perdue on winning, again, his treasurer's seat.
Well, we
He's a fine
appreciate it,
treasurer.
and looking forward to many more years of great service from him. Thank you both. Well, that's it for our Board of Treasury Investments portion of the show, but we want to switch gears here a little bit and talk about last year. The SMART5.29K Run Walk raised enough money to award $1,200 each in SMART529 accounts for 7 children. This year, that number has nearly doubled. Thanks to generous donations and more registrations, the 2016 SMART5.29K Run Walk raised enough money to award 12 SMART529 scholarships of $1,200 each. This fundraiser provides a unique opportunity to help some young people in West Virginia who have faced many obstacles in their lives. Kim Ward has more on that story.
It's an amazing program, and we feel blessed that we found it, and that, it helps the resources for our son to be able to go to college.
For children who spend time in foster care, the odds of getting a college degree are statistically against them. Treasurer Purdue created the Smart Start Awards program to try and change those statistics here in West Virginia.
That's what the Smart 529 program is about, changing kids' lives all over this state.
And parents agree.
And making sure that every kid has an opportunity and increasing those odds.
The Smart 5.29K Run Walk, held each spring, raises funds that are deposited into Smart 529 college savings plans. After an application process, these Smart 529 accounts are then awarded to children adopted from West Virginia's foster care program. It's a cause that holds special significance for Treasurer Purdue.
My wife was a foster child. She had great parents, just like you have. And she had an opportunity to go to college and changed her life.
The vast majority of jobs today require a college education. That's something that hits home for Amy Gray as a parent and a teacher.
I realize education is the most important thing, and I try to tell my kids that, whether they're my own kids or my classroom kids.
The Smart Start scholarships are a great way for families who have opened their homes and hearts for adoptive children to catch up on college savings. But families are also grateful to have the Smart 529 savings opportunity for all children.
To try to help not only foster children or adopted children, but all children of all walks of life, and making sure that they understand what programs are out there for them to help with that process.
Reporting for Treasury Notes, I'm Kim Ward.
It is always so exciting to see these children receive the awards, but there are always more children in need. The 529 program is looking forward to helping more children in the future. If you'd like to help out, mark your calendar for the 3rd annual Smart 5.29K Run Walk. That will be happening on May 20th at Appalachian Power Park. We hope to see you there. That's all the time we have. Thank you for joining us. Remember, you can always get the latest news and information from the State Treasurer's Office. Follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, and on our website. Keeping you informed on the Library Television Network, I'm Gina Joins with the West Virginia State Treasurer's Office.